Okay, so you've read the problem, and you've obviously tried it out on your own before watching this. So we have 3 workers, Rachel, John, and George, and they're destroying a building. And we're given some information. Now let's say that when she's working on her own, Rachel can destroy a building in R days. When John works on his own, let's say that he can destroy a building in J days. And let's say that George can destroy a building in G days working on his own. Then that means each day, Rachel will be destroying 1 over R of a building, John will be destroying 1 over J of a building, and George will be destroying 1 over G of a building. Now since we know that Rachel, John, and George work together for 1 day before Rachel gets injured and can't come back, then we would really like to find out how much of the building they destroyed that day. So it would really help us if we could find out what 1 over R plus 1 over J plus 1 over G is. Because this is how much of a building Rachel destroys each day, this is how much John destroys, and this is how much George destroys, then together, this sum is how much all 3 of them destroy each day. Now from here, we need to use the other information that we're given in the problem. So we know that George and John can destroy a building together in 5 days. Then that means each day, George and John are destroying 1/5 of a building. So then we would have 1 over G plus 1 over J equals 1 over 5. Because this is how much work George gets done each day, this is how much work John gets done each day, and together we know that they destroy 1/5 of a building each day. So this is why our first equation is true. Similarly, since we know that George and Rachel can destroy a building in 3 days working together, that means each day George and Rachel are destroying 1/3 of a building. And finally, since Rachel and John can destroy a building in only 2 days, that means each day Rachel and John are destroying 1/2 of a building. Now remember, our goal is to first find 1 over R plus 1 over J plus 1 over G. But we're not exactly given that. All we have are a bunch of our terms paired up with each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to see what happens when we add all 3 of our equations up. Because when we do that, we'll get that twice of the sum we're looking for is equal to 1 over 5 plus 1 over 3 plus 1 over 2, which ends up being 31 over 30. And since we're trying to find 1 over R plus 1 over J plus 1 over G, we can divide both sides by 2. And we'll find that 1 over R plus 1 over J plus 1 over G ends up being 31 over 60. Now it's a good thing that we found this sum, because now we know how much of a building Rachel, John, and George destroyed when they were working together that day. They ended up destroying 31 over 60 of a building. Now, since they destroyed 31 over 60 of a building together, this leaves 29 over 60 of a building for John and George to finish on their own, because Rachel will not be working anymore after the first day. So we see that the amount of work left is 29 over 60. And since George and John destroy a fifth of a building each day, it's going to take them 29 over 12 days. So we found that John and George will take 29 over 12 days to destroy the remaining 29 over 60. But this is not the final answer, because we want to find the total time spent working. And since Rachel, John, and George work together for one day, we need to add that first day to the final count. So in the end, the project is going to take a total of 1 plus 29 over 12, which ends up being 41 over 12 days.